Welcome to The Street Porter and the Philosopher. I'm the philosopher Rebecca Lowe.
And I'm Henry Oliver.
The Street Porter and the Philosopher is part of our Substack project, The Pursuit of Liberalism, which is dedicated to refocusing classical liberalism on the arts and philosophy alongside economics.
This is our first podcast season, and it's all about liberalism and the arts. We're covering everything from paintings to novels, the reading crisis, to the future and even the idea of liberal culture.
We've applied a division of labour, under which we each speak with some fantastic guests.
We've got academics, writers, an editor, even a bureaucrat. And at the end, Rebecca and I are going to do a review episode.
For a full transcript of this conversation, including helpful links to the references mentioned, you can click on the link in the show notes or description. And don't forget to visit pursuitofliberalism.com.
Welcome to this episode of The Street Porter and the Philosopher. My name is Ben Brophy, and I'm neither a street porter nor a philosopher, but I do have the joy of being colleagues with Henry and Rebecca. And so today we're going to do a retrospective episode where we walk through the season and think about what we've learned, what was interesting, and what's ahead.
You've clarified that you're neither a street porter nor a philosopher, although I think I'd push back on some of that. I also like the implication that this is an implication we have throughout this podcast, that Henry must be a street porter.
Yes, very clearly.
Well, Ben can be an honorary street porter for the day.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. See, so much more welcoming
Ben
than philosophers.
Is quite a bit of a philosopher, however, so...
A secret philosopher.
Secret, yeah. Don't tell anybody.
Secret.
Don't tell anybody.
Have you ever spoken with this guy?
All right. So with that being said, Rebecca, I'll start with you. Looking back at the first season, did you end up making the show that you thought you were going to make, or did it turn into something different?
Oh, man. I mean, asking a philosopher a question like that, predicting the future, do things, the coherence of the question. No, I like this as a question. I think, yes, broadly so. I think it was fun. I think it was... we got to talk with some very interesting people. I also think the show is quite like Henry and me. And it's quite, Henry's episodes are quite Henry, my episodes are quite me. But it also brings together some of our shared interests and shared personality traits.
This is good. We love this.
My episodes are a little more argumentative. Henry's are a little more...
freewheeling.
Kind?
Kind. Yes.
No, I'm kidding.
That's a very interesting comment, Ben Brophy. I like to think that the way the philosopher shows respect is by giving objections to the people who can take the objections. The people I interviewed could take the objections. They seem pretty happy at the end of my episodes. The other thing I would think that we did succeed in terms of matching our hopes and goals for this season, I think we did a pretty good job of considering the relation between the arts and liberalism, which is something we feel very strongly about. We think it's under-discussed. And I think through a kind of method of different kinds of conversations with different kinds of people about different kinds of art objects. I'm saying that partly because Henry hates it when I say the term art object.
I'm happy to say books, paintings.
And I want to introduce some taxonomizing. I think we showed that this relation is alive and well, and that it's something worth investigating as liberals.
I'm tempted to ask what an art object is, but I feel like that will get us way off course.
We're going to need another hour.
Yeah, let's not do that.
I wasted my childhood and teenage and early 20s reading like aesthetics, literature, and thinking about these questions. Art object is a term the philosophers use often when they are thinking about the arts.
Okay. All right. Henry, what about you? Did you make the show that you thought you were going to make?
Yeah, more or less. I think I agree with what you said. I would just add that, we did it in a liberal way. We went about it in our own independent styles, but it is unified, as you said. And I think part of what we're trying to do is model that kind of approach as well. So it was very different interviewing Celeste than it was interviewing Sunil, because they are doing different things, doing different, they have different personalities, they have different projects, and you want to be able to showcase that and work out how is that relevant to what we're doing. So some shows it's more uniform and they do a certain way of doing things. What we're doing is it will be different with every person in a way.
Was there any connective tissue that you saw throughout the episodes? Is there a thread that ties it all together, or are these kind of ad hoc one-offs, or how did you see it?
I'm tempted to say that I don't want there to be a thread. I don't like all this unifying of things all the time, all this neat packaging for marketing. As I know.
How dare you?
You're managing to annoy both the marketing expert and the philosopher with this claim, Henry Oliver.
What a surprising coincidence.
It might not be a philosopher and marketing person. It might just be the two of us. Is honestly.
I think that's true. This funny combination. I would add, I do think one unifying feature is that, I mean, if you look at the tagline of our Substack, and we host this podcast for our Substack, we have this idea, which I think you and I both believe strongly, and I think Ben Brophy does as well. I'm just going to put you on the spot here, but I know this from our many conversations that, and one of our mutual friends one time said this, you're not going to really win the war as liberals with supply and demand charts. We think that's very, very important. Don't get me wrong. Describing the world using the tools and methodology of economics, modern economics, is incredibly important. But we need to use other kinds of arguments too. So the tagline of our Substack is something like refocusing classical liberalism on the arts and philosophy alongside economics. And I feel as if we sort of instantiated that in some sense, or part of that, through this season, by talking about the arts as liberals, thinking about those relations explicitly, and bringing it back to the value of liberalism, I think.
Liberalism fragments very quickly and very readily. That is particularly true of economics, and it can also be true of social issues as well. But when we talk about the arts and ideas, actually there's a lot more unity. And I think that was one of the most interesting things, is that we had a lot of different sorts of liberals in the episode. Some of them may not even think of themselves as liberals, but there is a cohesion there that if we talked about economics would have been much harder to achieve without being more sort of intellectually sectarian.
It's sometimes the case, and the philosopher would say this, when you take the edge case or when you take the case that you're not quite sure about, it can help you firm up your grip of the thing. So by asking something like, can a piece of art be liberal, or this composer because he did these particular things, or this artist because she did these particular things, does it mean something to say, therefore, that they're liberal, or to take that from it? It just kind of forces us into thinking, but what is liberalism? What is it to be a liberal? Whereas if you take the really obvious cases, they can be central examples and they can help you work out from that. But sometimes to then clarify around the edges, taking less sure cases is methodologically valuable. And I think we did that quite a bit.
But this is one of the differences. I would just never do any of that. I'm just always going to stay on the edges and be like, if you can work out why this is relevant to liberalism, whoopee for you. That sounds boring. Let's just talk about paintings or something. The relevance should make itself known. So that is two different approaches. Well, and I think that's important. That's a liberal approach.
Let me push back on you with your own words. You wrote a paper somewhat recently that I had the chance to review, which was a lot of fun. And you referenced George Eliot talking about something along the lines of stories are just more persuasive than harder sciences. Do you recall this?
So before she became a novelist, George Eliot was an intellectual, and she translated things. She translated Spinoza. She was writing essays. She was editing. And she wrote this long essay called The Natural History of German Life, in which we can see her talking herself into the type of novelist she is going to be. And she says that persuasions, trying to make persuasions based on generalized arguments and statistics, which is what's happening in this period with, economists and sociologists and all these social sciences that are coming up. She says, no one cares. What we need is the picture of life that only a great artist can give. Now, she's often quoted as saying that art is the nearest thing to life. Right. And that's what she means by that. It's a picture of life that only the great artist can give. And that will be persuasive. So submerged within George Eliot are all the liberal, humanistic, Spinozan ideas, but they never come out in propositional form. And you could never do that kind of approach. She wants you to come to that in another way. And I think that was basically what I was trying to do in some of those episodes. But as I say, different people should be interviewed in a different way. And if we just said, no, this is our format, I think it would have been much less interesting.
That's good. Rebecca, was there anything that surprised you throughout the season?
I was surprised sometimes, I think, actually, at how much, for all Henry's saying this, I found many of his episodes very philosophical. I was thinking this morning about your nice episode with Celeste, which I enjoyed so much. I mean,
she was great.
She was really awesome. And I love Soutine. I've seen his paintings in exhibitions. I've seen them in many places around the world, and I've liked them, but I didn't really know that much about him. I must read her book.
It's a great book. We recommend it.
Yeah.
Yes.
It made me think this interesting conversation you guys had about whether sometimes great artists can be justified in leading certain kinds of lives, which otherwise might seem problematic in some particular kind of way, whether because they seem too thin or whether because the people around them suffer. I mean, this makes me think straight away of the great thought experiment in Bernard Williams about Gauguin.
Yes.
And that's a particular thing, talking about moral luck.
Yep.
But it's a very similar kind of notion. So I like that. I think you guys implicitly were doing some kind of philosophical thing. So that I don't think it really surprised me, because I think you're more philosophical than you like people to think. Henry has this fantastic kind of grumpy persona where he does this like implicit mode of
English
arguing.
persona.
That's right.
Yes.
I mean, I can argue about the distinction between Englishness and grumpiness if you want, but as Oliver Trowley, our friend, if you were here, he'd be like, you're at risk of being both under and over inclusive here, Henry. But the other thing I think didn't surprise me, but I was glad about, is that a lot of these episodes were very fun. Like we, as our little gang here, Ben and you and me and these other people, we have a lot of fun when we're talking about these serious matters. I think we do it in a serious and deep way, but we have light moments in it. And I think sometimes people don't see that from the outside, particularly if they just read our work. And I love how we had that. So one of my favorite moments was, there are many moments actually in the episode of Xena and Hollis. I felt like we were talking about a very big and important matter, the Declaration of Independence. And it's a very serious matter, and there are some very dark things that are associated with that time. But we had some real moments of, I think, beautiful joy. And it wasn't that I wasn't expecting it, but I was delighted that it came about.
I think those two are such a good example. Hollis will say things like the Declaration of Independence is like a pitch deck for a startup. And Xena you can see Xena like what is happening? Like, I cannot even talk, but they're still having fun, and they're sort of exhibiting like the real values of scholarly investigation and liberal thinking. Like, it's an amazing thing.
It was really lovely, actually. I got to know them properly this year. We were all at a conference in Texas, and in the evenings we'd like escape and go and have a drink. And we were sitting around this fire pit, because we're in America and we have these fancy things. And somehow or other we decided to read the Declaration of Independence. Or I ended up reading it, because I think Hollis thought it was very amusing having the English person reading it, like a breakup with America. This was her line. I mean, she has these brilliant lines.
Yeah.
And then we had it was kind of a moving moment, but it was also a fun moment. And then when we were thinking about these episodes, I was like, we need to recreate this. I haven't yet watched that episode, because actually we're recording this before it came out. Although I remember recording it quite well. So I'm interested to see how that came over in the studio, because sometimes recreating a moment like that, and we did it slightly differently in the studio, but I do think we got some of that sense of intensity and seriousness, but also joy that it manifests in the friendship that I have with these two women. And I like that, at least my guess is that comes across pretty strongly in the episode.
Yeah, as a watcher and a listener, the thing that I appreciated most is it felt so much like the conversations we used to have in the office all the time about, everything that's bad and wrong with everything Henry says. And I think that's just a ton of fun, for sure.
I like how Ben has, my catchphrase to Ben is, it's bad and wrong.
That is, yes.
I one time said this in the pub, and the guy in the pub, the bartender, was walking past just as I said this. He kind of looked at us and was like, oh no, the philosophers are here again.
Yeah, we have a reputation there now. I think every time I go in, the bartender's like, okay, what do you want? I'm like, we're here. But anyway, our reputation precedes us. And other surprises, Henry, I think you learned something about Hayek that perhaps you didn't know.
One of our guests was Erwin Decker, who is a researcher here at Mercatus, and he specializes in the history of ideas. And he wrote this wonderful book. It is a few years old, but it's new to me. And it's all about Hayek and Mises and that circle in Vienna, and he sees them as economists, but he sees them as part of the kind of avant-garde of their time. And what they're worried about is the decline of civilization. And he calls them students of civilization. So we're used to Hayek being concerned with the moral order, as he calls it, in The Fatal Conceit, and all these sorts of topics. Cass Sunstein actually just blogged about, is Hayek a traditionalist? Compared to, he says, Mill is not a traditionalist. So Erwin's book really goes into the details puts them in their context, in their intellectual history, and sees them as these, he calls them students of civilization. And I found that very interesting. We had a really good conversation, and Hayek is sometimes talked of in these like abstract terms, and it's very interesting to see him in the mix as one of these people.
This is nice preparation for me. I mean, you guys also, we talked about this, and you guys did a little event in the office as well.
Yeah.
And this is excellent for me, because I then, a couple of weeks after, went off to Vienna for a conference on some of these So this was very nice, and I was thinking about some of Owen's claims. I mean, I'm interested in that period partly, or at least I'm interested in what was going on in Vienna in the first half of the 20th century, partly because of the philosophical impact of people like Wittgenstein. But also, I mean, I've had a bit of interest in Stefan Zweig. I mean, because I like Richard Strauss very much, and he often said Zweig. I think Zweig's memoirs also brilliantly chronicle the downfall of what was going on in Vienna, this place where it seemed to be the kind of apex of human civilization. And then within such a short amount of time, you have this catastrophe.
It's a great book about the twilight of liberalism in that
right.
period. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I think, just on my selfish level, you guys having been talking about these things informed my trip and the conference I was going to.
We gave you talking points.
You did. Not that I need more Hayekian talking points, but
That's good. Kind of a vain question. I know you guys might have peeked, so you might know the answer. What do you anticipate will be the most popular episode?
I did look at the stats. I know the answer.
But there's episodes yet to be released, including this one.
Also, that's right. Also, who knows? Maybe, one of our guests will go and do something astonishing tomorrow, and then that episode, will gain the kind of derived interest. Right. But also, I mean, who knows? Maybe this episode will be the...
I'm not surprised to see that it's the Cass Sunstein episode.
That did pretty well.
Yeah.
I mean, they all did pretty well, actually.
They all did very well, and they all deserve to do well.
Yeah.
The guests are all fascinating, but he's got a kind of... There's a certain interest in Cass Sunstein that's obviously well merited by like the record of his work. And to have someone like that talking not just about liberalism, but about Bob Dylan and these other things, that is quite fun.
Yeah. I assumed it was actually the Bob Dylan effect. I mean, I think Cass is awesome, and I really enjoyed that conversation. And yes, of course, he does have a great reputation, but Bob Dylan is a kind of cultural phenomenon, right?
I imagine there are a lot of Bob Dylan podcasts that no one listens to.
How many?
I can see there being a lot of Bob Dylan content that's not doing so well. I think there's a long tail.
How many Bob Dylan philosophy interview discussions?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I think is.
Cass did a funny tweet where he's something like, "This is not one of my usual ones."
Exactly.
Which is what we want.
It's nice to see him in these different contexts. That's what I think.
We did do full on philosophical debate in that episode.
That's also why I thought the Sunil episode was great.
Yeah.
Because you don't get a lot of bureaucrats on podcasts like this, and his work is so fascinating and gives a completely new perspective on the reading crisis. And it's just great to get that data out of him. And I don't think you can get that somewhere else.
I loved that episode. I think it was a great start to the season as well. It's also there's this funny kind of meta irony that we're saying we don't just want to do the stats, but then we start with a stats episode. That said, of course, this is just because we don't just want to do that doesn't mean we don't want to do it at all. So I think it's important for us to underline that we do think the kind of empirical sciences are important.
Yes.
We don't want to do away with them. We just think there's a division of labor which hasn't been sufficiently well applied here.
But also in the reading crisis discourse, there are so many surveys which just give you this snapshot, low quality data. And it's easy to just say, we know reading's in decline. That's obvious. We don't really know why or what's going on. And you can just pull all this terrible data and say, oh, it's this or it's that. Sunil actually gave a really, really thorough and detailed outline of what we know and what we don't know. And it's actually fascinating how much we don't know. And how much much more detailed work could be done. Proper studies could be done. And at the moment, I think a lot of the discussion is just based on vibes. And I thought it was great to draw that out.
Well, it tackled a few things that are very much just in regular conversation, particularly for parents. All right, what about a book versus a Kindle versus an audiobook? These are things that people are talking about constantly, especially as it pertains to children. And so I felt like it spoke to a very real question that's out there in the zeitgeist, if you will. So it's helpful.
That's right. But also everyone else who talks about it has an ideology, or they have an opinion, or they have an agenda. But because he's a bureaucrat, he's scrupulously honest. Right. And so he really said, well, we don't know that much about that. Or yes, that's true, but it's not a very big difference. I think that's actually really helpful because for a lot of people, particularly kids and parents and stuff, it can get a bit scary and a bit oh my God, what's going on? What should I do? And then he says, well, people do retain less on Kindle, but it's not that much less, or it's less in certain ways or certain types of reading, or it's less at different ages. And it's actually quite reassuring to know that the headline claim, it's not made up, but it's inflated sometimes.
Yeah, and I imagine reading anything is better than not reading, right? So this is overall a good thing.
I sometimes find this funny, this kind of claim the kids aren't reading anything at the same time as the kids are only spending their time on their phones. Like, what do you think they're doing on their phone? I mean, okay, maybe some of the time they're playing little games, but most of the time they're reading, just because they're reading shorter. Again, then we can go, and that's one of the things I loved about this, that there was this kind of honesty and then this digging down. I also thought it was fun. I mean, one of my favorite things about this podcast is our little intro, which our colleague Melody did. I mean, the whole thing is beautifully shot and edited. But I love this little intro, particularly the bit where Henry says, "Even a bureaucrat," and we kind of giggle. And that's partly, I think, because there's this implicit idea that bureaucrats are not fun, but also it's funny that liberals have the bureaucrat. Well, I love how Sunil just comes across. He's such a nice guy, and he's so smart, and he is fun. And I like the kind of chemistry between you guys. And I felt like it was a great beginning to that end, because it also dispelled some myths. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm a skeptic of bureaucracy, but like bureaucrats are like...
They may not be fun as a class, but Sunil is fun.
Also, Mises does tell us that we don't do away with all of the bureaucrats. So we sometimes forget these things, I think.
Yeah. We touched on this a little bit earlier, but I'll ask again just to put a finer point on it. You guys spent an entire season of podcasts on arts and liberalism. You know, why? Why is this important? Why have you done it? It seems there's a lot of people who might not necessarily make the connection straight away. So I'm curious what motivated you to do that?
Well, I think that's the answer. People might not make the connection straight away. And that's why it's interesting. The question is really, what is there a connection? Because obviously the relationship between liberalism and the arts is quite vexed. It's quite difficult to think of a genuinely liberal work of art. And the question of whether there should be such a thing as liberal art is, I think, kind of an open question. And so it gives you a lot of different ways to talk about these subjects that are bringing a new perspective or opening things up in a new way. Soutine it's a very liberal story in many ways, or it touches on many key liberal ideas. But it's hard to say that, like, looking at his painting of a pheasant is a liberal experience in any kind of ideological sense. And I think that's quite an interesting distinction. And a lot of good discussion can come out of that.
But where do you land? Is there a connection or is there not?
Well, there's obviously a connection in the sense that Soutine had to go to Paris. Paris is a liberal place. The production of his art is therefore happening in a liberal context. It brings up questions about immigration, about people moving, what it's like to live in a different country, and so on. You know, there's that great book, Sunny and Sonia, that we read last year.
Great book.
I don't know if you could say that's a liberal book in the sense that it, quote unquote, espouses liberal values, but it's clearly a liberal book in the sense that it is about what it is like to be in the Indian diaspora. What is it like to leave one culture and live in another? These are core liberal concerns. So I think sometimes it doesn't have to be a liberal book in the way that some books are Marxist or conservative in order for it to be of interest to liberalism.
I think I really enjoyed thinking about some of these questions. Again, it enabled me to go back to thinking about some of these issues in aesthetics that I used to think about, much more than I do now. And I'm interested in things like the nature of things and, what is an art object? What does it mean anything to say that it's liberal? But I think for me, the easiest way to make the arguments about the relation are probably causal claims around things like liberal culture produces certain kinds or tends to producing certain kinds of art. What is the impact on art in terms of like people's values? So you get this kind of causal error question. Which way does it fly? Does it fly both ways? Those questions have some element of empirical consideration there. I think there are also some other kinds of answers that we gave throughout the season. Something like when an art object, in some sense, displays some notion of something like experimentation, when an artist is anti-conventional, there are these kinds of types of arguments you can give. I mean, Cass and I had an argument in our episode about whether any of these Bob Dylan songs are explicitly political. I think, for instance, some of those, and I think it was particularly around whether they're protest songs. I mean, for me, some of the songs that I particularly enjoyed listening to by Dylan, just generally and in preparation for this, I don't know that much about Dylan, but I've recently started listening to more of it. There are some of these songs which seem explicitly about particular instances of injustice, and they're about actual people. I think he wrote these songs within a particular period of time. Cass has much more awareness about Dylan's own take on these, and I think some of his distancing from the more kind of political narratives. But me listening to these things, or indeed the more kind of anti-war songs, again, I think Cass has his own view on that. It seems to me like those kinds of things where there is language and the language itself explicitly engaged with some kind of liberal notion, it's much easier to make arguments that in some senses instantiates something about liberalism. When you come to like figurative art, or when you come to music without text, I think it's much, much more difficult. I mean, we had a nice argument in our philosophy working group yesterday about abstract art and meaning and intention. I love thinking about these kinds of questions. And I feel like we did a pretty good job of covering the bases and coming up with different kinds of arguments for when and when not it makes sense to think of art objects in these ways.
How does the Christopher Scalia episode fit into this?
Oh, that was such a fun episode. It's really good that we brought this up. I think a lot of what we're talking about is ideologically liberal, right? Are you a classical liberal or whatever kind of liberal? There is a way of talking about being liberal as in liberal democracy. And I think that's a much narrower set of ideas, and an awful lot of people agree on the value of liberal democracy and then become, and after that are conservatives or progressives or whatever they are. And the book Democracy that we discussed with Chris is all about how does liberal democracy actually work. So it's not about the ideas, it's about how politicians scheme and connive and lie to each other, and who's got the secret letter that if it comes out that he said the thing and did the backroom deal, and he's trying to get married to this woman, and is it because he wants her money, and does she want to marry him because then she'll be the first lady? So it's a really fun book about the dirty work of Washington and what does power really look like? Because it's easy to say, oh, liberal democracy is so fantastic and all these high ideals, but then the day-to-day business of liberal democracy might be neither liberal nor democratic.
I mean, I think I'm going to hold back from pushing back against this idea of this being a narrower sense in which we use liberal, because I want to say I really enjoyed reading that book. This episode came about broadly, I think, because you and I and Chris had dinner at your house.
That's right.
And we'd all been reading this book. It's a fun book. It's a very American politics book. It's a very DC book.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
And Henry Adams, you see, was such an insider.
Yes.
But he never really got anywhere. So he's the perfect person to write about how things work, because he knows it all, but nothing's he published it anonymously, but it's not really on the line for him.
It's very short, quick read. There are also for an English person, there are all these implications, and you're like, oh, I know this is clearly getting at some particular person, but I'm not quite sure who this person is. And it's kind of an intriguing book, isn't it?
I think it sold a lot of copies at the time because there was a general sense of this character could be one of these three people.
That's right.
And this guy is clearly and so there was a lot of that kind of intrigue. Whereas for us, it's sort of settled into being an insider's look. And we obviously love films like that. Or TV shows like The West Wing or whatever. People love the kind of, how does it really work in the White House? What are the moral compromises that people have to make to achieve the good thing? And I think, people who work in DC who haven't read that book would find it both amusing and instructive.
It was a really fun episode.
Yeah. Chris is great.
He is awesome, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that very much.
I would just say, from my experience, Veep is a much closer picture of reality than The West Wing, as far as I'm concerned.
There's this thing in England now where like an MP will go on the news and say something, and people will put it next to a scene from The Thick of It, and it is literally, it's almost word for word.
Yeah,
and you sort of think, are they doing that on purpose or do they not know? I mean, this is horrible how close it is.
It's also funny how that's kind of expanded. That was the little jokes that people like Henry and me who've worked in Westminster used to always have. Like, we would just sort of make these little jokes, and now it's become much broader and much broader.
The monster's woken up. I used to, when I worked in Westminster, I used to have to walk over to the Department of Education to get my boss to sign letters. And I would go into this, sort of vast building full of people, and you'd be walking along and they have TVs up on the wall, and it's supposed to show the news or the House of Commons. Most of the time it was showing The Thick of It, and no one was watching it, and they didn't realize they were just sitting there it was replicating what was on the TV. It was hilarious.
That's so funny.
And now it's broken out into the wider world.
And I mean,
that's bad news for England, I think. Yeah.
I don't know. I want people to know the truth. This is like the aliens. This is our version of the aliens.
This is Disclosure Day. Yeah.
Henry, what was the most interesting thing you learned, if anything, throughout the season?
Oh, by far, it was some of the claims made in the Sunil episode. Some of the things I was talking about before about what we don't know about the reading crisis, like differences between different demographics, whether those are ethnic demographics or other things about why certain groups read more or don't read more or whatever. There's actually quite a lot of work to be done to investigate all of that. I was very interested in that.
Rebecca, how about you?
I enjoyed the conversation that Henry and Celeste had about colour. I really enjoyed that. And it struck me, I hadn't thought of it before, but I do very much associate Soutine with red.
Yes.
Yeah. I also, yes, that made me think. I don't know if that's something I learned, but it's certainly something in some sense that made me think a little harder.
The section of your episode with Tyler as well about whether liberals can be pacifists.
Yeah,
that was
enjoyed
very
that.
Good.
It's just something I've kind of thought about on and off for a long time and haven't ever written anything about, but had these views about. It also engages pretty strongly with what was sort of my first interest in political philosophy, which is about social contract theory, and you're thinking about pacifism in terms of at least absolute pacifism and whether it's coherent for a liberal to be a pacifist. I really enjoyed that. I think we had, again, a pretty good... Well, that's one of the few things I think Tyler and I sort of agreed upon, albeit for different reasons. We tend to disagree quite a lot about philosophy, which I really enjoy. I think it's a great part of our friendship. But I would say the colour thing did stick with me. It made me think... yes, it made me think pretty hard.
Yeah, I like that.
There is also this theory, isn't there? It's probably been debunked, that a lot of successful... And again, we can think is successful in terms of meeting demand, is it in terms of being critically acclaimed, that the colour red plays a very significant role within successful pieces of painting. There is this general claim. I've read some things about it. Whether that's true or not, once you hear that claim, you can't help but be influenced by it. And I was reminded of it when I watched and read your episode.
Yeah, I mean, I asked that question because I feel like he's a lot more red than other artists. Maybe it's the use that the red is put to or something.
So, there is one painter who he makes me think of, and I just thought of this moment, is Rouault. I don't know, if Celeste were here, I'd ask her. There's something about the similar kind of slightly boxy, slightly abstract, figurative people, and the use of red. Another painter who, and actually there's some great religious Rouault paintings that you'd like, Ben. Yes, I must ask Celeste about that.
Rembrandt is good at red, but I don't know. I'm not sure about that general claim about red. I can think of a lot of unread.
It might still be the case that even though there are a lot of unread paintings that are successful, that nonetheless more paintings.
Sure.
I mean, you can do the whole.
It's very interesting.
I think my understanding is this is a pretty mainstream claim. But once you hear it, then it's hard to get rid of it. And it may, of course, then in itself have an impact on your own notion of what is striking.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, red is just clearly a striking colour, whatever that means.
We want to know what you learned.
I mean, the thing that caught my attention the most was certainly Sunil's episode on reading. I was rapt attention was paid because I'm thinking, I've got young kids. It's like, all right, I'm thinking about how best to get information into those little heads. So that was the thing that I was paying the most attention to. The thing I knew the absolute nothing about was Rebecca's episode with Tyler. So that entire episode for me was, this is all new. British composers, I knew nothing. So that was very interesting. And of course, listening to Rebecca and Tyler go back and forth is always fun, even though she let him get away with some stuff.
Yeah.
But it's okay.
You must have been feeling charitable that day.
Yeah.
I'm aware that so the other episode I recorded with him was an episode of my philosophy podcast, and I did not let him get away with anything on that one. So sometimes you gotta.
Yeah.
I think there was an element of I've loved Benjamin Britten's music since I was about 10 years old. I know that Tyler is less keen on it than I am, so I was very glad that he agreed to do this, and he listened to a lot of. This sounds like I'm saying I didn't push back because I was glad that he had spent the time thinking about Britain, and that's not true actually. It's maybe because we were broadly in agreement more than we often are on philosophical matters in that episode. Certainly on that central question of the liberal pacifist thing, we found points of agreement. I think also we do both think that the War Requiem is a wonderful piece of art. He also agreed with me, which I was quite surprised about, that I made this very big claim partway through that Benjamin Britten is the greatest ever musical setter of text. And he said yes, he agreed with that. I was surprised by that. But I thought that was very fun. I really enjoyed that. And like I say, I've loved Benjamin Britten's music for 30 years.
Yeah.
And I don't most of the time talk about it or think about it. You have limited time in your
course.
life. And I spend most of my time thinking and talking about philosophy.
Yeah.
So being able to do philosophy about Benjamin Britten, it's just going to be joyful for me.
Yeah, it's awesome. So this entire season was about arts and liberalism, but to do a little bit of a teaser for next season, get the people excited. As I understand it, you guys are going to talk about ideas in liberalism. Dare I say, arguments in liberalism? Talk to me about what you guys have planned.
There may be some arguing. Yeah,
I've persuaded Henry of the benefit of arguing.
Yeah. Implicit arguing in my case. Yeah.
So what do you guys have on deck?
Big ideas. We have our favorite upcoming episode, which we haven't yet recorded, but we're very excited about. We're calling. Whether it will be actually called this in the real world,
it's going to be called this.
The Big Alien episode.
The Big Alien episode.
Okay, I need more context.
We're going to talk a lot about aliens.
And what they are and if...
What are those red orbs?
These are good questions.
I mean, come on.
Do the aliens exist?
Is this not keeping you up?
If the aliens exist, what are our obligations to them?
Of course.
What is our likelihood of knowing whether the aliens exist? We will also, on top of
Can we maintain a liberal democratic constitution if aliens come down and take over?
And if they're tiny, can we smush them? Is a question.
No. Oh, Ben. Oh, okay.
There is this very interesting argument. Who is it here? I think it's Shelley Kagan, who I also mentioned in one of our episodes. It's very funny. I enjoy reading Shelley Kagan, even though he's a consequentialist, and I don't like that. He's a very inventive philosopher, and one argument he makes in his book, How to Count Animals, is that I'm pretty sure that's where I heard this argument first, that we are very biased towards large animals.
It's true.
It's something like, if the insects were the size of cats, we just wouldn't treat them so badly. So smushing the tiny aliens, I mean...
But if they are people size, it's going to be harder for them.
But are they not God's creatures as well?
Yeah, so I'm being facetious, clearly.
One frustration I had with the Project Hail Mary film, beyond the fact I just thought, it's fun and enjoyable, I don't really think it's a great film, there are many better space films, is that there's all this attention paid to the alien.
The rock monster.
The rock monster.
Yeah.
And there's this idea of straight away almost, that this is, some other... as you just said, one of God's creatures. I don't believe in that kind of God, but although I kind of believe in a creator God, so maybe I do believe in that. But straight away, it's this idea, and then also it's seemingly astonishingly easy to communicate. I mean, this is hilarious for those of us who are interested in the philosophy of language and the kind of indeterminacy problem. But for me, the even bigger philosophical insanity about this movie is that the amoebas, who are then instrumentalized and destroyed and used to try to save the world, there's no possible thought about, well, maybe we could communicate with the amoebas as well. All of this attention on the rock monster and nothing on the poor amoebas. I mean, I found this quite... The second living thing that they find, the amoebas, are just kind of thrown away with no possible concern for their livelihood. Interests of the amoebas. This is what it's like to be friends with Rebecca.
This is what it's like to watch a film with her.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Everyone else I hadn't considered the amoebas. Yeah, was it the amoebas who were killing the sun? Or the amoebas that then infected whatever was killing the sun?
I can't even remember, but the poor amoebas' interests were not considered at all, and I feel like they were brutally instrumentalized. I don't remember now because
you should write a follow-up.
I should write a follow-up. I found the film annoying.
Planet of the Amoebas.
So the thing I think of with Rebecca now is Pluribus, and how the aliens won't kill anything, and we can only eat the things that die of their own volition, and we'll just we can't even pick an apple from a tree. We can only pick it up from the ground.
They had an internal debate about whether they would even eat the fruit. Right?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
When they said that, I was like, "Did you write the script?"
People don't think sufficiently about our obligations to plants, and they certainly don't to insects, as I wrote the other day on my Substack.
Yes, for sure. So big ideas. I need the arguments that you get.
So
tell me some.
Aliens, space, like liberalism in space.
Yeah. I love how I persuaded all my friends that space is important. Cool. I've been trying to do this for a while.
Yeah. And we're committed to that whole project here, right?
We are now.
I think that's very important.
It is very, very important. Space innovation, that will effectively.
Yeah,
exactly. We're interested in how culture and ideas change the world. You know, there are lots of debates among economists about what it is that matters, and some of them are very much in the ideas and culture argument, and we want to get into that. And I think we also want to look at
pluralism, liberalism, and conservatism. That's going to be fun. I mean, we can do the kind of English relation. We'll invite an American on. I have some insights into the Australian.
American conservatives are quite liberal, whereas English conservatives are sometimes liberal, sometimes a bit crazy. So we want to look at that difference.
Oh, that's good.
So we have a lot of big arguments to consider.
Not that I mean to imply that American conservatives aren't crazy. I love you all. I know how crazy you are.
How dare you? All right, last question. And really, it's just an open forum for you guys. But is there any last word or arguments we need to have before we put a bow on season 1?
Could there be a last argument?
For the season.
The arguments never end here
for the season
pursuit of liberalism. No, I think I just want to reiterate that, like, this is taking an interest in the arts. We talked earlier about, are the arts themselves liberal? Mm-hmm. The really important thing to me is that taking an interest in the arts is liberal and is important to liberal thinkers and liberalism, as it was to, like, Adam Smith and John Stuart Mill and Isaiah Berlin and, well, you know, or people at Mercatus today. Like, it is a long-standing part of the tradition, and we're really invested in that.
I think there's this very big question about the extent to which liberalism adheres to any kind of conception of the good life. The idea that, you know, pluralism is inherent within liberalism. I think liberalism is a kind of set of variants, which is kind of a pluralistic take on liberalism itself. But I believe very strongly, and I want to talk about this in the episode about pluralism, that doesn't mean that anything goes, that there are some ways of life which are not good ways of life. If you're a liberal, that's how you should see it. And it seems to me that a life in which people don't engage with the arts, don't engage with these astonishing achievements of humankind, these things which can tell us stuff about what it is to be human, they can also tell us things about, like, the other things around us. So the way that our ears work with audible sounds, the kinds of things we can do with language, the kinds of things we can do with text, being inquiring, being inquisitive, embracing innovation is something I think liberals often are keen about. And I think that's right. I don't think it means that other kinds of people with other kinds of frameworks for addressing these kinds of questions can't be. But I sometimes worry that commitment to innovation, dare I say it, to progress, that our liberal friends, and I mean by that the rest of the people who are liberal, beyond some of us who are, you know, we all talk about, when we're hanging out, we do talk about books, and we do talk about music, and we do talk about movies. Sometimes I think people see that as being separate from the conversations about liberalism. And I think whether it's because we're kind of instrumentalizing these goods in order to push forward our arguments, because we believe these arguments and we think people in the world would have better lives if they embraced the tenets of liberalism. So there's some kind of instrumentalist account on which it's valuable for us as liberals to use these things in order to get our points across. But I also just quite strongly think that a good life led in which we'll have artistic experiences. Yeah. And there are some excellent artistic experiences we can argue about what excellent means in terms of art objects, and believe me, we do. I don't really see other kind of public liberals doing this in this way. So it's fun for us. I think it has this kind of side value. And there are these very big questions about whether it's sort of integral to liberalism, which I'm interested in, but it could be overdetermined, I think is what I'm saying.
There are obviously a lot of liberals now and in the past who've been literary critics or critics of other sorts, and I think it's just useful for us to join in with that. As the type of liberals that we are, classical liberals are sometimes underrepresented compared to different sorts of liberals, right? And you see that on Marginal Revolution. That's a distinct contribution. So we're sort of fitting in with parts of the broader Mercatus project as well.
I think that's a very nice point. I think also, I mean, in our very first piece we wrote for Pursuit of Liberalism, we gave some examples of how some of the great classical liberals did engage explicitly in their work, in their lives with art. And I think that has great value of all different kinds. So yes, I think we're partly within this tradition. I think we also said something there about, it's not like we need a new liberalism. We just maybe need to reframe it slightly differently for today.
That's good. Well, Henry, Rebecca, thank you for joining me. It was great to talk with you.
Thank you, Ben.
Thanks a lot. To find more episodes of The Street Porter and the Philosopher, and the full transcript for this episode, check out our joint Substack, The the pursuit of liberalism.
If you want to know more about each of our work, I've got a Substack and a podcast called The Common Reader, and Rebecca's got a Substack called The Ends Don't Justify the Means, and a podcast, Working Definition.
If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, @StreetPorterPhilosopher. Or you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever your favorite podcast app is.
For now, take our guests' great advice and listen to some music, head to the museum, read a great book, and we'll see you next time.